Who is this Acharya Prashant, and did he make unconscious mistakes in life?
We have a problem of plenty.
One mischief that you did, you still regret.
But that was a bad one.
Krishna or Shiva?
It's much the same. No choices there.
Lakshmi or Saraswati?
Saraswati, obviously. Yeah, I don't even need to explain, I suppose.
So they are not one.
No, they are not one.
Osho or J. Krishnamurti?
The same thing that assists you to climb at the lower altitudes becomes a burden when you have reached the heights.
Welcome to Off Limits, the New Indians platform where we try to seek answers for the questions that live in grey zone, that are off limits from the dominant public discourse. Today we have with us Acharya Prashant. I'm not going to introduce the subject to our audience because we must seek answers, the whole idea of off limits. Namaskar. Acharya Prashant ji, my first question is, who or what is Acharya Prashant?
A person seeking his own liberation in the only way possible by sensitizing others to their own liberation. So that's an answer at one particular level. There could be several other answers in other contexts, other ways. I suppose this one would do to begin with.
And when you say Acharya Prashant is a person, what does it mean? What does that represent really?
A human being with the consciousness that seeks fulfillment. So, a human being like any other, like all of us.
Are we cognizant that we are conscious beings? And what does it really mean to be conscious?
See, to be conscious means to have choices, to realize that you are not bound or conditioned to move in one particular way as randomly determined by the material forces of existence. That you have volition, that you have a say, that you have an agency, which is choice. So that's consciousness. We all definitely think we are conscious. It's just that there is real consciousness only when there is real choice, which can happen only in real freedom.
Are animals conscious?
In the sense that human beings must be. Animals cannot really be called conscious. But in their own dimension, animals are conscious. You see, it behoves an animal to operate purely by its prakritic algorithm. So if an animal is going by its prakritic nature, which is its biological nature, its physical nature, it passes to call it conscious. But the same cannot be said in the case of human beings. An animal breathing, eating, running is indeed conscious. But a human being cannot be called conscious just because she eats, drinks, breathes, or even thinks. The parameter in case of humans is choice, free choice. Is the person exercising choice? Animals are not even supposed to exercise choice. The lion is constrained by its body to be a flesh eater. The lion cannot say, I won't kill. But human beings have to exceed their physicality, their materiality, their biology, which is prakriti in Vedantic terms. A human being limiting herself to her physical mandate must surely be called unconscious. The learned ones have told us that just because you are eating, breathing, walking, you cannot be called as living. And that applies only to human beings. You see, we are special. So the benchmarks for us are higher. We are conscious only if we are free. And if we have no love for freedom, then we aren't conscious.
3 conscious choices that you made and you regret them.
Consciousness is when you exceed both exaltation and regret. So what I said, you're conscious when you have gone beyond your physical mandate, which is also your mental mandate. So anything done in consciousness is beyond the scope of reward or punishment, regret, despair, or happiness. No.
So, 3 unconscious choices that you made and you regret them. Who is this Acharya Prashant, and did he make mistakes in life? Did he make unconscious mistakes in
Now
life?
we have a problem of plenty. I'll have a tough time picking up the 3 mistakes I can call as my top ones. You see, one makes them daily. I should have given higher weightage to my own personal reading time. That's the first thing that I regret. I used to be a voracious reader, but since the last few years, with the work of the foundation spiraling up, it has eaten into my reading and reflection time. It should have been clearer in distinguishing between emotion and virtue. So the line gets blurred there often, right? So love for truth is one thing, while sentimentality is another thing. Should have been tougher in dealing with many things. The third thing is probably the body. I neglected the body for long, for the same reason as I neglected my reading.
But would you call this unconscious choice?
Yeah, of course. Of course. See, only that which is unconscious can be regretted.
Are you saying people don't make bad choices consciously?
Of course. A bad choice has to be an unconscious choice.
It can't be a conscious choice for anybody in the world.
Only unconsciousness is bad. In consciousness, whatsoever is done is all right.
So, are we saying that criminals in the world are unconscious?
Obviously, unconsciousness is the mother crime.
And therefore, the line between good and bad gets blurred only because there are people who are unconscious.
Obviously, or you could redefine good as meaning consciousness and bad as meaning unconsciousness. Huh? Good and bad cannot be moral distinctions. They have to be distinctions based on the quality of your consciousness.
So, how do we then make sense of good and bad in the world?
To make sense of good and bad, the one making sense has to be very conscious. Otherwise, I do not see, if I do not realize, then the only way I can label something as good is by matching it against some preset criteria or pattern.
Don't you think it has anything to do with your upbringing as children, your parenting, your society, your environment?
The entire role of parenting and education has to be to awaken and uplift the consciousness in the child. Right? We are born deeply unconscious. The human baby is not too different from the kids of any other species. So that's the reason why we need so much education. And the proper purpose of education is awakening of consciousness. However, that can be done only if the parents or the educators are themselves conscious people. Otherwise, in the name of educating the kid, we end up burdening and conditioning the kid even more.
Who awakened your consciousness apart from your parents?
You see, every kid ultimately returns to home, right, in the evening. There is the school, there is the playground, the friends, there is so much, but you return to the home. So the home remains a constant in the life of the kid. And in my house, I was lucky to have books. And the more I think of what is it that ignited and kept on feeding fuel into the fire, it was those books. Plus, my father would keep bringing books to me. So he was the supplier of the fuel.
Where did this love for reading come from? Is it genetics? Is it something a priori? Is it something that you carried through generations? Where does this initial liking, dislikes, or love or repulsion for things come from?
At most, I can say that I was fortunate to be provided with stuff I could read. I would simply say it's a matter of choice. Somewhere you have to stop the chain of causation. You cannot say this happened because this happened, because this happened, because this happened. If that's the way it is, then a computer program can capture it, and an advanced engineering lab can produce thousands of kids with a spiritual bent of mind. Just saying that the books were there, and I just preferred reading over any other activity.
And your parents helped, encouraged? Was the influence of parents or friends or somebody else there in life, early life? Even though you're insisting that let's not go into the causation, but I'm trying to understand Acharya Prashant is.
You see, I didn't have too many friends. Didn't have too many friends. I did have friends, but that was limited to my school time. And those were not days of the internet. And I didn't have kids, my friends, visiting my home. So I had the opportunity to be with my books for long hours in the day. And it was not merely books pertaining to wisdom or something that I read. I was not training to become a spiritual leader. I was reading from all directions. I would read history. I would read comic strips. All that is available. Anything one can lay his hand on.
But was there a moment? Do you recall an epiphany, a moment where you felt something awakened in you?
So there was this almirah containing the books, and it stood next to a big sofa set. And between the almirah and the sofa was a little space that could at most accommodate only a kid. It was one of the cold months, probably not too cold, maybe November, maybe February. And I was found asleep there late in the night. And the arm of the sofa would have been this high, as it typically is. And I was squatting by the sofa. So I was not even visible, right? As a kid, when you squat, this is the height that you take. So I was not even visible. And I had fallen asleep there. And the book in my hand was The Wonder That Was India by Basham. I was reading it. And I was never someone who was reading from cover to cover, because it was not an academic requirement. I was reading for myself. So I would randomly pick up a book, open some chapter, sometimes randomly, sometimes out of choice.
How old were you?
9 years of age. And when I woke up, I was quite serious. Serious in the sense that, the typical childishness. That was not there for an hour at least, and it was not an epiphanic moment or something. It was not a spiritual book I was reading. It was
History.
It was history. So that's one that I remember. Then I was put to bed, and there I remained awake for another half an hour or something, and I was just staring at the ceiling. Nothing too remarkable in this. I don't have extraordinary moments to recall.
Are you a single child?
No. I have a brother, I have a sister.
How was your relationship with your siblings?
Usual. Nothing special there either.
But then you sort of were also liked your space where you could just read and think.
Yes.
And your siblings did not intrude into that space.
They were not too fond of books. So if I am with books, that keeps them away. I used to actually help them with their academics. So they had their own interests.
And school, friends, teachers, how did they see you?
Academically, I was always doing well, top 2 in the class. And after class 6th or 7th, I was regularly topping. In fact, the distance between me and the next one just kept increasing.
So you liked competition.
Oh, I was very competitive.
You were.
Oh, very competitive.
So there was this drive, the drive into the mad race.
But at the same time, I was competing not so much with the classmates or batchmates. I was competing more with the question paper. That is the reason why I would often not be satisfied even if the marks appeared good.
Was that because of conditioning at home?
It's not that parents were hell-bent on producing toppers. Obviously, they wanted that I do well, all three of us do well. But it was not to the extent of craziness or something. In school, I was also quite mischievous, very mischievous. So
What did you do?
the teachers would be in a curious space. On one hand, they would want to make me the head of the house or the class monitor or such things. On the other hand, they would find themselves compelled to punish me. So the monitor would be found standing outside the class quite a few times. When I was not with books, I was not very controllable. When I was with books, I was quite sedated, just immersed in the text.
One mischief that you did, you still regret.
But that was a bad one. If I disclose that, I mean, it would be the first disclosure of its kind. You have seen class teachers' attendance registers?
Yes.
So there was my class teacher, and because I was mischievous, she didn't quite like me. And her situation was worsened by the fact that she could not absolutely admonish me because she was the English teacher and I was doing quite well in English. So one day she left the attendance register behind and she's gone and it's lunch break. So I opened my lunch box and there is a pakoda there, oozing oil or ghee, whatever it was. You know how much class teachers love their attendance registers, right? How nicely they maintain them and how important those registers are. So I take the pakoda, keep it on the attendance register. It was lying open. and I closed the register. And just to uh, complete the formalities, keep a thick book over the place where the pakoda was. So she returns and finds this thing done. And I was clever enough to ensure that nobody had seen me doing all that. So after the lunch break, we had, I suppose, geography or history period. I was good at geography and history. The teacher liked me. And the class teacher comes rushing, steaming in, all red, furious. And it's a geography period, but she comes and says, all of you stand up and raise your hands, both the hands. So everybody stands like that. And she does that and says, I want to know who did this. And unless I get to know that, you all will stand like this. And she retires to the teacher's room. But the teacher in charge in that period is somebody else. And now the whole class is standing there like this. And only one person knows for sure who has done that. And that one boy is shell struck. So he is the most silent of all. Huh? Others are taking time to gossip or look around or do something. So the geography teacher says, all right, you all can't stand this way whole afternoon. And those of you who are keeping silent will be allowed to sit down.
You got away with that.
No, wait. Now, in between, one of the girls from my class, and she had her own grudges against me.
You hit on her. Okay.
Not exactly, but
All right.
it was in fact the opposite.
Oh, okay. She was hitting on you, but you were not interested.
She had meanwhile gone to the English teacher, the class teacher, and whispered to her that the kind of oil that is there in your register, I think Prashant was the one who had brought pakoras today. I don't know for sure. I'm just sharing with you that he had brought pakoras today. So the class teacher, who was anyway not very fond of me, had already my name as a suspect. So she comes after half an hour and finds the entire class standing like this. And only one fellow had been allowed to sit down. And he was sitting and reading. And the entire class was standing. She just blew up.
Okay.
And she says, but he is the prime suspect. Now that became some kind of an encroachment on the authority of the other teacher, because it was her period, her time. So she said, but he has been standing so still and keeping so quiet. I have no option. He has to sit. So that created a bit of a funny situation. I tried to lock my lips so that I am not seen laughing. Even in that moment, I was. But that strained my relationship with my class teacher for the rest of the year. So that's not something I think I should have done.
So that you deeply regret now.
Not deeply, it's all right. I mean, if she happens to watch this, sorry, ma'am. That was me, and I
Finally,
don't think
the confession comes.
The confession comes, and I don't think I should have done that.
Acharya ji, from this mischievous boy, a studious boy, to college days, did you hit on girls, later women?
Didn't find too many worth it. So just like any other boy, I had my attractions.
Did you never find any woman who was spiritually your worthy or whose spirit attracted you?
No. I found a few innocent ones. I could go to them and speak to them of things that mattered. And they were remarkable, important, because they were innocent, because they could listen. But even that listening stops after a point. Not everybody is interested in going too far mm, on the spiritual road, too far down the spiritual road. So it's a rare and precious thing, such a human being. And that's what I learned. Uh, the one who is worthy of being loved is actually someone you will have to create, because on their own they probably do not exist. At least I didn't find them hanging somewhere to be just picked up.
Are you really saying that man and woman are ordained to have fickle relationships?
Exactly. Very well said.
So there can be no real love between a man and a woman?
I do not know who I am. She does not know who she is. Where is the question of love? I mean, two unconscious people uh, just stuttering down their unconscious paths, and randomly they happen to bump into each other. Is that love? Obviously not.
So are you conscious or unconscious?
I don't know. One can only uh, try to see what the current condition is. So you keep looking at yourself. There are telltale signs. So if you'll ask in binary, conscious or unconscious, I'll modestly say unconscious. Because if I say conscious, that's like violating a principle. To say one is conscious is to say one is absolutely conscious, because only the absolute point deserves to be called a state of consciousness. When you don't know everything, it's better to simply say you don't know.
So are you saying, by and large, humanity, what we call humanity, is unconscious or is in the process of gaining consciousness?
Yes, obviously. Humanity is a huge unconscious lot.
So when we say love or when we say humanity, what are we really referring to?
We are referring to a species that is born like animals and lives like animals, even though it has a much superior potential. When we talk of human beings, we are really talking of 8 billion animals, that's all, driven by their biological mandate,
So we are mostly driven by our biological mandate.
obviously.
You also said that humans are special. For us, the test is tougher, and we cannot be seen at the same level as animals because they just follow their biological drive. Humans try to exceed that biological mandate.
See, that's what human beings must do, but that's not what they actually do. And that's why it's rather unfortunate that, in spite of the potential, in spite of what is possible, we live like animals. And that's why we are worse than animals. See, animals living like animals are all right, they have no option. But human beings living like animals are a disgrace because they had an option.
Is it really within our control, within our limits, to have that choice, which you repeatedly refer to as the conscious choice? Do you think we are at that stage, that level of evolution, or whatever you would like to call it, where we can actually access that conscious mind?
You see, what is a question? A question is a choice, right? I could have said, I don't know and I don't need to know. But what do I say? I don't know, but I must know. So the possibility to inquire and know is always there. Else there can be no questions possible. So it's not a matter of the stage of evolution. It's not even a matter of one's upbringing or economic conditions or social conditioning. None of that. As a human being, the option to do better, to inquire, to know, to not to proceed without understanding is always there.
So, wouldn't you then acknowledge that human species, have been on that path of inquiry for maybe 5,000 years, ever since the civilization came into existence, where because of inquiry, we discovered many things in this world. We discovered the idea of cosmos, the idea of consciousness. Maybe 10,000 years ago, there wasn't any human who thought along these lines. Given what the literature is, what the evidence is, it seems that the human species has been on the path of inquiry. Wouldn't you say that there is a process of awakening, process of becoming conscious?
Consciousness is something that every new kid has to explore freshly for herself. The fruits of consciousness are very unlike the fruits of science. In science, one person can know and transfer the knowledge to another person, right? Whereas in the domain of consciousness, every person has to work for herself, and a choice has to be made afresh. Not only can you not take much from what has happened historically, you also cannot take much from what has happened in your own past. You might have made great choices in your own past, but still life will ask fresh questions of you this moment. So consciousness is a continuous real time exercise. So we cannot say that mankind has been on an upward journey of consciousness since the last 5,000 years. No, that cannot be said. Yes, there have been individuals who have displayed wisdom, consciousness, the urge to know, but mankind as a whole has been pretty much stagnant, right? In fact, what has happened is that because of growth of science and the benefits of technology, the need to go inwards has actually reduced in modern times, because it is often suffering that makes you look at yourself and question yourself.
So, are you saying that science or human inquiry or human search for truth in their own way is a stumbling block in the path of consciousness?
It is the means, not a stumbling block. It is the means. Stumbling block in the sense that if you do not deploy this means, then you will reach nowhere. You cannot read the answers provided by someone else and quickly elevate your consciousness. No, that cannot happen. On the other hand, when it comes to science, you can very well hold a mobile phone developed by someone else and use it. Use it, and it will be useful. The same thing does not apply to the inner world. There, everybody has to work on himself. Heritage is useful only to a very limited extent.
But why does everyone need to follow this path? Where's the need?
How would you feel if this question is not answered? That's the need. Just as one needs her questions to be answered, similarly, one needs consciousness to be elevated. Animals do not have too many questions. We have questions. Why do we have questions? Because we have consciousness that experiences lack of fulfillment. From this urge to be fulfilled arise our questions. Think, if you have a question and it doesn't get answered, how do you feel? You feel
Frustrated.
restless and frustrated, right? And that's the nature of unfulfilled consciousness. It cannot be at rest. And that's why inquiring is not only important, but actually mandatory.
Well, let me look at this whole issue from somebody who gets up in the morning, goes to his farm, does farming all day, brings food on the table for his children and his family. Do you think this man's life, where he's in a way carrying the same boulder, the same rock, what we call as the myth of Sisyphus, and in this process, where does he have the time, or where does he have even the urge to know and inquire beyond what he's doing every day?
Why is he doing what he's doing every day? And if there,
Survival,
no, why does he need to even survive? That's a legitimate question, no?
because there is biological mandate.
No, the biological mandate says continue living. And there is another mandate that says live only if. And that's the reason why people have laid down their lives very consciously.
So, are you saying that if poor people who have to earn their bread, if they start thinking on these lines, they might end up committing suicide?
Or they might end up becoming one of the several fabled saints we have had. So many of them came from very poor backgrounds. You see, you are restless, and that torments you no end. One of the options, obviously, is suicide. The other option is to heal your restlessness, right? Why do we discount that?
Maybe everybody does that in their private space every morning, every evening. Or maybe people do it while going to temples or going to mosques.
There has to be greater sincerity. If people were actually doing that with any bit of sincerity, the fruits would be evident. We won't have an epidemic of mental disease. We won't have so many wars. We won't have such greatly unhealthy relationships. We won't have one person exploiting the other. We won't have, most of all, the earth in such a catastrophic state. Look at climate change, look at the extinction of species. So all that is testimony to the fact that we aren't looking at our lives.
Aren't you passing a moral judgment on how this world should be? Our relationships should be perfect. We should be happy. There should be love all around. There should be no wars. There should be food for everyone. Why does life have to be a utopia?
Life does not have to be a utopia. But if I leave you in a war zone, you'll want to get out of it. I'm talking of the natural urge of consciousness to be at peace. I'm not talking of a state coming from an idea. Utopia is an idea of the mind. I'm talking of the fundamental need of the mind. These two are different things. Even if I do not ideate, there is a need to be sane. Sanity is not an idea. Sanity is the fundamental requirement to be alive. Otherwise, why am I living?
So you're saying war is not the need of the mind?
What do you think? War is needed? No.
Well, some would argue, for example, that humans are complex. There is love, there is hatred, there is war, there is peace, and all of it makes us human. All of it is natural. It's natural to this cosmos, to this world,
What
to
is
this nature.
natural is animalistic. We just talked of that. What is nature? Huh?
So
What is natural is coming from the body. Unfortunately, even if we try to, we cannot remain creatures of the body. I would have been very glad had we been like animals, satisfied with just food, drink, and sex. But that's not the way we are. Now, what to do? That's the human condition. You cannot be satisfied with fulfilling just what is natural. As a human being, you need to go beyond the natural, which is beyond the physical, material, biological.
But who defines this? Why should I accept it as
Your question defines that. No animal asks this question. No animal ever has a burning curiosity. We have those curiosities, right? And that proves we are different from animals. No animal will ever say, I want to be liberated, but we want to be liberated. We do not merely want even answers, we want solutions. We want a state where questions are not just answered, questions are dissolved, questions disappear. No animal asks for that kind of a state.
so since we are curious and since there is this urge of consciousness, higher consciousness, isn't it human to what you said? We are more disgraceful than animals. We don't go by just the biological mandate. We, in a way, also oppose it. We have destroyed the earth. We have ruined many aspects of this life. But at the same time, since we are inquisitive, don't you think it's natural for all of us to make mistakes, to make horrendous mistakes along this path?
It's beautiful to make mistakes, but it's not beautiful to settle down. Human beings settle down at the wrong
You haven't
places.
settled down.
Human beings in general, they settle down. They settle down, and then even the opportunity to make mistakes is forsaken. So that's what. If you are constantly trying, exploring, experimenting, and then you make mistakes, it's so beautiful. Let there be only mistakes. Even that is graceful.
Is this because humans went on the path of science and technology and tried to make their lives more convenient? Is it because there is this strong urge to make life convenient?
Life being convenient is all right. We are sitting here, it's all right. If there is climate control, if the chairs feel not uncomfortable, all that is okay. It's just that primarily we have to live within ourselves. Science is useful in giving us a conducive outer environment. But don't live outside of yourself, you live within yourself. And that's a place science cannot enter. So the problem is not that we started leaning too much towards science. The problem is that self-knowledge got very little space in our education system, actually zero place. So that's where we went wrong. The day somebody decided that we don't need to teach our kids who am I. So everything became externally oriented. So you were taught about the continents, the languages, the polities, equipments, geography, everything. But you were never encouraged to go into your own mind and question your own identity. And that's what has gone wrong with human beings.
But then I see lot of spiritual movements, I see lot of spiritual leaders, I see people in millions seeking answers through these gurus, through you, through psychiatrists as well, through teachers, through leaders, through politicians, through scientists. There seems to be an urge, there seems to be that curiosity to know who we are. But then, are you then actually putting the onus on the leaders of the world or on the system of the world where we all seem to have gone haywire?
You see, when you go to a spiritual leader, how often do you find him exploring nothing but the I? In the name of spirituality, we talk of everything except the thing that matters, the self, right? So yes, people are rushing to spiritual leaders and all that. But what are they getting there? If you read most of the books that go by the name of wisdom literature, what do you find? You find all kinds of metaphysical crap. Where is the question, koham, who am I? That one thing that deserves to be gone into, explored, that remains neglected. Hmm? So, yes, people have this feeling, at least sometimes they are forced to acknowledge that they are restless and that monies or external endeavor will not provide them with rest. So they do rush to religious people or spiritual leaders. But what do they get there? What do they get there? Huh? So all that is not going to be any good.
So, do you think that if people, each individual, starts asking himself or herself the question, who am I? They will eventually come to a state of peace, a state of this, not adjusting with restlessness. Do you think man and woman, parents and children, nowadays we have relationships breaking down, societies are breaking down, and you seem to suggest that if we all begin to ask, who am I? We might have a more cohesive society.
Yes, I'm saying that, but there is a catch. All I'm saying is ask, who am I? There is somebody sitting within us who will come up with an answer. So the question, who am I, will get answered. And that kills the question. The way we are, we cannot live without conclusions. It feels very embarrassing to just have a question hanging within. Who am I? So sooner than later, we are compelled to settle that question with an answer. I said, no, we are beings who love to settle down. So we settle down this question as well. Then you require an agency or an environment or a book or a person who can destroy the answers you have provided to this question. Otherwise, the question will come, but the question will be defeated. You need someone who can defeat the answer, the sham answer, the fake answer, obviously, that defeats that legitimate question.
So, in a way, you are saying human condition is what it is, and it is inevitable for all of us to fall in this rabbit hole.
Had I been that hopeless, we wouldn't have been talking here. So it's not that it's inevitable strictly. It's just that it is prudent to have a factual assessment of your condition. Otherwise, one can entertain himself in a fool's paradise and say it's easy. Well, it's not easy, it's difficult. And we are living in very, very miserable times. I'm not saying that as a subjective perception. That's the fact of this planet. If you look at what we have entered into, it's a mass extinction phase. Hmm? It's a sixth mass extinction that we are already into. It's just that we want to continue living in that imaginary paradise. So the media does not want to talk of it. The leaders won't take this up, and you don't find this being discussed anywhere. But then the possibility is always there, irrespective of how bad one's condition is. One always has a choice, and that's consciousness. So even if we are down in the dumps, the choice is still available. And my mission is to encourage people to exercise that choice.
When you say mass extinction, what do you really mean? We were just some years ago, we were 6 billion people. Now we are 8 billion people. I mean, we've been continuously growing. What is mass extinction?
There is a certain natural rate at which species go extinct every day. Hmm? So there is a rate. That rate has increased by almost 1,000 times in the last 100 years. Even as we have been speaking over the last hour or so, thousands of species have gone extinct in just this time slot. Hmm? I'm not talking of individual members of those species being lost. I'm talking of entire species disappearing forever. That's what is happening, and that's happening because of uh, reasons that are man made, anthropogenic. So we have raised the average temperature of this planet by 1.5 degrees centigrade. And the temperature is increasing at an increasing rate. The carbon dioxide concentration in the atmosphere should naturally be around 280 ppm. It has shot up to around 450 ppm now. And all that has happened only in the last 50 to 100 years. I said sixth extinction phase. Of the previous five, three were caused due to an abundance of carbon dioxide, the same thing that we are seeing today. And the global temperature that has risen by 1.5 degrees is not going to stop at 1.5 or even 2 or probably even at 3. It might rise to 4 or 5 degrees centigrade. And the results are going to be catastrophic. And all that is going to happen within our lifetimes. I'm talking of the next few decades.
So human species will be wiped out?
Probably not. Probably a few would remain. Few would remain to lament.
I noticed that you are simultaneously also lamenting that we are too many, 8 billion people, and at the same time you're saying mass extinction on the horizon. Are we complaining that?
That's a natural fallout. And we are not seeing that. The earth simply does not have enough resources to sustain 8 billion or 10 billion or 11 billion of us.
How many can the earth sustain?
Depends on the quality of life that you define for yourself. You see, we don't merely exist. We exist to consume, right? That's what a human being does. If you look at a chimpanzee or a deer or a lion, its consumption footprint has not changed over the centuries or the millennia. A monkey today consumes only as much as it used to several thousand years back. But human beings, today, the existence of a human being means a very different thing to the planet than it did 5,000 years back. Not only that, such a bad philosophy has been fed into us by our education system that we think that the purpose of life is happiness and happiness comes through consumption. So not only are we consuming, we want to consume even more. And the more you consume, the more prosperous you are taken to be, and the more respectable you are. And if a nation consumes a lot, it is considered a developed nation. GDP has become the criteria of development. So all that portends a lot of horror in the horizon.
So what should be the yardstick to measure development of human society?
We live within ourselves, no? So we require only as much stuff outside as would be conducive to inner development.
So we don't need air conditioners?
You do need air conditioners if you think that without an air conditioner, your meditativeness would be obstructed.
All religions in the world claim to know this truth. They claim to know the enlightenment. Like Hinduism, Islam, Christianity, all of them seem to know. So are we saying that religions across the world have failed to pass on this knowledge system or this awareness or this consciousness?
When you say religion, what exactly do you mean? How many people read their religious books? In the name of religion, what you mostly have is culture and tradition. How many Christians are scholars of the Bible or have even gone through the Bible at least a couple of times? How many Hindus have actually even seen a copy of the Vedas? Forget about reading, forget even about touching. How many Hindus have actually even seen a copy of the Rig Veda? So what do you mean by religion? Religion is simply hearsay. Religion is grape wine. Religion is gossip and rumor. Religion is something that you have seen your parents and their parents do. So of what good can be such religion? This is just rumor mongering. Somebody says, oh, religion says this, religion says that. Where does religion say that? And to top it all, you have a class of priests who have their own vested interests. And that class exists across all religions. And they present religion to you as it would suit your ego and their interest. So there is no religion. Religion can possibly provide an answer if one can penetrate the outer shells of religion and enter its core. That's where you find stuff that is life affirmative, that is joy giving. But but nobody is going there.
So, in a way, are you saying that science has encouraged more materialism, more consumption, and taking us to the path of
Science is
mass
beautiful.
annihilation?
Science is lovely. In fact, people are uneducated even in science. We need much more science. See, the problem does not lie in the fact that science exists. In fact, science needs to be strengthened much more.
Than religion?
These are two different domains. In the external domain, if you want to know, you need science. If you want to understand how this screen functions, that camera functions, that gadget functions, how are these pillars able to hold this ceiling where it is, then you need science, right? So science has its own legitimate domain. We live within us, right? Third, fourth time, we must return to this fact. And that's a domain that science very respectfully refuses to enter. So science is a great thing in my hands. And what I'll do with science depends on my inner state. If you allow a madman to hold the keys to a nuclear arsenal, you know what you'd get. And that's the condition of humanity. A lot of destructive potential, a lot of power in the external world, without any wisdom to know what to do with that power. So, as would be obvious, we are using that power to annihilate ourselves and all other species along with ourselves.
So, science and religion, as you rightly pointed out, they pertain to two different aspects of mankind. If that is the reality, I want to understand, why does Acharya Prashant call himself, or as you are known, to be a practitioner of Advaita? What does that mean?
In very simplistic terms, Advaita means that the two-ness that you experience, that makes you rush again and again towards the world, will be of very little use to you. Advaita is non-duality. So even non-duality is defined keeping duality at the center, right? Advaita, non-duality. We all experience duality, two-ness. So there is me, I think there is me, and I think there is that banana, and that gold, and that something else, and that woman, and that, and that. So there is this two-ness. There is me, and there are those goodies out there. And the natural biological urge is to say, if I get those things, then my restlessness would be healed. That's two-ness. Advaita is to realize that the cure does not really lie out there. Your relationship with the world has to be founded on a different ground. It cannot be founded on the ground of desire. Advaita would mean my relationship with the world has to be in a way that helps me enter my interiority. The world is not an end. The world cannot be my destination or target. The world can at best be a means to help me penetrate into myself. And that constitutes a healthy and fair relationship with the world. That's non-duality.
So, in this non duality, science and religion, in a way, are one.
In this non-duality, science finds its proper utility. Now science does not exist to appease me. Now science exists to help me fulfill myself. You see, there's this mobile phone, right? It's a product of technology. If I do not know myself, I'll use the mobile phone for all the wrong purposes. And what do I mean by wrong? Not morally wrong, not legally wrong. Wrong in the sense that the use will decimate me. I'll be using it to just reduce myself to an animal. And that's what most of us do, right? Products of science. And we use them in very self destructive ways. When you are clear inside, when there is non duality inside, then you know what to do with science.
I'm going to go to the very fundamental question, because what you are saying is probably very complicated for most people in the world. Most people understand the idea of love, but you seem to reject that. You seem to say that it's all superficial, it's fickle. What is love? What the rest of the world is experiencing, and you are saying that it's not there.
I'm rejecting the idea, not love. So, what the world has is an idea of love. And if love is an idea, then it's something very small and quite rotten. So, where do ideas come from? All ideas emerge from the ego to fulfill the superficial desires of the ego. So, if love is an idea, you will be looking at the other. It could be someone from the other gender, it could be a little kid, it could be an animal. Or, as people say, I love chicken. When you want to really sink your teeth into something, you say you love it. So, it could be a food item. Whatever you would be looking at, you would be looking at that thing just from the perspective of fulfillment of your desire. And that's what.
Is it so wrong to have desires?
Nobody wants to be exploited so that the other can fulfill his base desires. I might be prepared to sacrifice myself if my sacrifice helps the other. But if I am an object of somebody's desire, then even after swallowing myself whole, he would still be unfulfilled. So my life has gone and he has achieved nothing out of my so called sacrifice. So there is nothing in this love. Nothing in this love. Man looks at woman to appease himself. Woman looks at man again to appease herself. And the two of them are in a lifelong mutually exploitative relationship. Of what good is all this? And we don't want to face this, acknowledge this.
If everybody becomes so enlightened as you are, people will probably not fall in love, people will probably not reproduce, people will probably not follow their biological mandate.
When people are wise, that's the only time they can be in love. Wisdom and love go together. So, what you're saying, on the contrary, when you know who you are, when you have some insight into yourself, that's when you become capable of love for the first time. Most people spend their entire lives not loving, not because they didn't find someone worthy enough to be loved, but because they were fundamentally incapable of loving anything. It's unjust to ask such a person, are you loving me? The fellow has no faculty to love. And that faculty has to be learned, it has to be awakened. And that's the proper purpose of education.
You seem to have insight into yourself, and you're constantly seeking this path. Are you actually saying that you're incapable of love? Did you never feel that you are capable of love regardless of what the other person is?
This very discussion is an exercise in love. How can I be incapable of love? Had I been incapable of love, I wouldn't have been sitting here. It's just that we have been so dulled down by the conventional images and definitions of love that we do not realize true love, even if it is right there in our face. A great lover, Christ, for example, what do we do to him? We don't even see that he loves us. All the wise men, They are just lovers, but we forget them, we ignore them.
So you love everyone?
Why else would I make myself available to everyone?
Are you available to everyone?
Is there a restriction on who can watch my videos or read my books?
Will you meet everyone?
That's a physical limit, you see. And that also depends on the urge of the person to meet me. I'm available.
Why wouldn't you actually give benefit of doubt to many people who might be in love, in true love, but you are constantly passing this judgment saying that, oh, people are not in love, it's only they're chasing their desires, they're constantly being driven by their biological urges, and they are making actually a mess of it.
Even if you have to pass a judgment, first of all, you want to scrutinize the evidence, right? You look at the facts, you look at what's there on the table. And when you look at the state of the earth, when you look at the mess that we have created, there are obvious conclusions.
So love is not possible.
It's unfortunate that love is quite possible, but we deny ourselves.
Now we are into the third round of our conversation, and this is going to be rapid conscious choice. I'm not going to call it unconscious, because then you might actually say that it was unconscious and therefore you will not take any responsibility. So I'm going to give you two choices. You will have to pick one, and you'll have to very briefly explain, maybe in one sentence or maximum 2 sentences, why you chose what you chose. Man or woman?
Woman.
Why?
Possibility.
You will have to explain this.
When you say man and woman.
Man or woman?
Man and woman, classically, both are just Prakriti. So both come under the umbrella name of woman, which is the human state. In some sense, all of us are women. You are a woman in just the biological sense. I too am a woman in the mental sense, right? So the word woman describes entire mankind. You could say womankind.
Okay,
Right?
womankind.
So the possibility of redemption is there only to the woman. Who else will have that possibility? So a woman, is used as a metaphor for the one who is seeking her beloved. So that's the mind. The mind seeking peace. I would want to remember that we all are that unfulfilled consciousness, which is that we all are that woman who is seeking the ultimate beloved. In that sense, possibility.
Desire or renunciation?
Desire.
Explain.
The fundamental thing is love. Love is the highest desire. It is only when you desire the highest that you will have the guts or the daring to drop the lowly things, which you call as renunciation. So renunciation can never come first. Srimad Bhagavad Gita talks of karma yoga and karma sannyas, and he says they are ideally the same thing, but practically karma yoga is preferable to karma sannyas, which is much the same as saying that love takes precedence over renunciation, or that love is the mother of renunciation. If you are in love, you will, without even knowing, drop a lot of nonsense, and you will become a renunciate and you won't even know that. So love will bring about renunciation. At the same time, renunciation without love won't last and would become some kind of hypocrisy.
Osho or J. Krishnamurti?
J. Krishnamurti.
Explain.
Purity.
You will have to explain that.
The higher you go, the purer you need to be. Methods and tactics are all great when you have just begun the climb. But the same thing that assists you to climb at the lower altitudes becomes a burden against climbing when you have reached the heights at higher altitudes. So Krishnamurti has an unparalleled purity. No methods, no distractions, no this and that. A very dedicated concentration on nothing but the truth. And that's the reason I said JK over Osho. At the same time, I have great respect for Osho. I think he can be very useful to those who are just beginning their journey. But as you ascend, it is Krishnamurti that you will need to seek.
Krishna or Shiva?
That's much the same. No choices there. But because these days, it's a topical thing. Because these days I am with the Bhagavad Gita, so I'll say Krishna. On another day, I would have equally said Shiva.
Explain to us that why are they are the same thing, and why Shiva today and Shiva tomorrow?
Krishna today and Shiva tomorrow.
Yeah, Krishna.
Oh, nothing. That's a mood, a fleeting moment. I mean, just yesterday I conducted a session on the Bhagavad Gita, and tomorrow I think there is another one. So it's just a human thing that Krishna is on the top of the mind. Otherwise, there is no difference between Krishna and Shiv. There have been phases when I have found myself immensely in love with just the word Shiv. Krishna and Shiva are one. You see, Krishna, as he speaks in the Gita, speaks as pure truth. And Shiv is another name again for the highest consciousness possible. So Krishna and Shiv are just the same. Someday you will feel like saying Krishna, someday Shiv. And there are days when I just love to say Ram.
Lakshmi or Saraswati?
Saraswati, obviously. I don't even need to explain, I suppose.
So they are not one?
No, they are not one.
Why?
Learning and wealth cannot be one, obviously. But at the same time, if you want to go deeper into it, if you pick up the Durga Saptshati, there, both Lakshmi and Saraswati are simply two names for the mother goddess. If you want to go there, then I'll say, just as I can't pick between Krishna and Shiv, I cannot pick between Lakshmi and Saraswati. But if you want to accord the popular meanings to their names, right? Then Lakshmi stands for wealth and all. Saraswati stands for wisdom. Wisdom any day over wealth.
Eastern philosophy or Western philosophy?
Eastern.
Why? Explain.
Western philosophy puts relatively lesser emphasis on who you are. There is a lot of ideation. There is a very honest and laborious exploration of man's condition, society, economics. But the purity and rigor that Vedanta displays in coming to man's fundamental identity and then declaring that liberation from all the identities that you hold is the very purpose of life. That is something that you do not find in Western philosophy. In fact, nowhere in Western philosophy do you find the word mukti, liberation. There is knowledge, there is exploration, there is realization, and I'm fond of Western philosophy, right? I'm not deprecating one over the other. No. I love Western philosophy. I want to go deeper into it, but liberation is something the West does not talk of.
India or world?
My India is not a political unit, not a geographical location, not a piece of land. When I say India, I refer to the place, to the set of conditions that enabled man for the first time to both look towards the sky and into himself. So that's the India that I love, the India of self-knowledge.
Life or death?
Death.
Explain.
That which we call as life must be put to death. And only then does real life begin.
So there's a life after death?
No, not after death. When you say after, you mean a flow of time. So at 4 p.m., life as we know it ended, and at 5 p.m., You had an afterlife. I'm not talking of that. I'm talking of a certain beyondness. I'm saying that this eating, talking, walking, mating, this is what we consider as life, right? When we are able to transcend this definition of life, then we really come alive. So let this life be put to death, and then there is joy, and the fear of death is gone. And the Upanishads say that is what is immortality, when the fear of death is gone.
I am going to ask you about your first and the last love, which is books. Give us 5 books that you have loved.
On enlightenment for beginners, Siddharth by Hermann Hesse.
Love.
Narad Bhakti Sutra.
On science.
Several. You could have Feynman lecture on physics. You could have the Hawkins book on time. Several books. But I would say stick to your textbooks. That's where you get science from. Science you just cannot read. Science without mathematics means nothing. So when we say science, there has to be an exercise book, a notebook by your side, where you keep solving equations. Science is not just literature.
Name a book on women.
Ayn Rand's We the Living.
Name a book on sex.
Specifically on sex. There are so many books that touch upon sex. Of Human Bondage. Somerset Maugham.
Name a book on Indian literature.
Shekhar Ek Jeevni by Ghye.
Thank you so much for this fascinating, enlightening discussion. I hope we can carry on once again, probably in future, for another conversation and for more love.